And just one more thing, can you share your screen so I can see what slide we're on and such?
Okay. Hello, everybody. I hope that you've had a good week. Mine was okay, I guess. I am joined here once again by a viewer of this show, Norik, who is nice enough to come on and
so I can see what slide we're on and such.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Give his perspective I hope that you had a good week. The situation in Venezuela, as he is Venezuelan himself. And I think it's good just because he has a very different perspective than a lot of what you're hearing in the media and what you're hearing in kind of these circles. But I'd be respecting your time. So if you just want to jump into it, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously not doxing, but just so people have an idea where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun last time. I don't know if you want to... Can you share your screen just so I can see where we're at exactly?
Norik, I can't hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me okay? Testing, 1, 2.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Just saying thank you so much for having me. It's always fun. Mm-hmm. Just wondering if you can share your screen so I can see where we're at.
Oh, I did share it with you.
Oh, how do I join? Sorry about that boomer moment.
Yeah, real boomer hours.
Okay.
I think in the chat.
Watch stream. Oh, there we go. Got it. Yeah. So, this is our second conversation here in the stream. I remember we first talked about Venezuela back in 2024, right after those violent elections that were denounced, and there's a lot of talk on the internet about, oh, this is just the U.S. trying to sabotage an election and whatever. And I basically came in to show, hey, no, actually, this is pretty much substantiated. And if you look at how they rigged the election, it's pretty funny. So then I gave a bit of a history on Venezuela and the ruling party there. I think in a couple of slides, there's actually a link to that stream so people can take a look at it. I don't know if you want to put it in the description of this later on.
Yep, I'll do that.
I wanted to circle back because there's been a couple happenings a couple weeks ago. Obviously, the biggest military operation the United States has done over the past who knows how long, right? Something of this magnitude hasn't happened
since maybe
the
most competent military operation.
Right. I think it took everyone by surprise. And there's been a lot of talk about it, sort of. Is this good for the U.S.? Is this another Iraq, or is it something else? Is this regime change? Why is the U.S. even doing any of this? I've seen a lot of misinformation, a lot of I don't want to say necessarily bad faith actors. I think a lot of people just don't know the relevant facts, so they're coming to the wrong conclusions. So I wanted to sort of share the Venezuelan perspective with the caveat that obviously I've been living in the United States for over 15 years now. So this is sort of like through the grapevine, how the diaspora feels about it, and the things we know about the situation. So if you want to go on to the next slide, I just wanted to show the general structure.
Sure. Just before we get into it, just very briefly, if people are watching this later. So on January 3rd of 2026, the U.S. did a special military operation where they attacked a number of Venezuelan army positions and sent in Delta Force, who was able to overcome Maduro's Cuban bodyguards and kidnap him, and he is now in New York facing trial. The whole thing was done very quick, and to the best of our knowledge, there was no U.S. casualties. So after that, Trump announced that they are going to be directly running Venezuela and that they're not going to put the opposition in power. And they blockaded it, and it's kind of ambiguous what's happened since then.
Okay. Yes, that's a very good summation of sort of where things are at right now from the layman's perspective. It was pretty shocking to everyone. No one expected... I mean, there had been a buildup, and we'll talk about that, with the U.S. sending ships and such to the Caribbean over the past few months. Mm-hmm. But... nobody knew what exactly the end game was. Was this a regime change? Were they going to try to invade the country? Or was this going to be an extraction? Was it going to be a sort of like Bin Laden situation? Turned out somewhere in the middle. So I wanted to talk about why the U.S. did this, and I think there's a lot of context that people are missing because it seems just sort of like imperialistic or like a power grab, or like, oh, we just want to take the resources. And if you just take things for what they're, if you just take the line that's being presented, that's how it seems. But this has been a long time coming, and anybody paying attention to the situation knew this something like this was going to be attempted. It was just sort of shocking how efficiently it happened. And like you said, the fact that the opposition isn't being propped up, but instead they're working with a transitional government that's basically the exact same regime, but without the figurehead at the top, is super interesting and not something anybody expected. So we'll talk about the pretext, the operation, just briefly. I think most people tuning into this have seen at least the headlines and the videos, but I wanted to talk about what actually happened. And then the aftermath, I think, is the more interesting part of the stream because there's a lot of speculation of what's going to happen. And I think without knowing who the power players are, you can't make an informed guess. So that's the structure of the conversation as I find it out.
All right. Whoa, you put in promotion for me? That's nice.
Yep. So I just wanted to show people, if they want a sort of general background on Venezuela. I'm not going to go into like who Chavez was or who Maduro was or why 9 million people have left the country and all that. So I figured for people who are completely uninitiated to the topic, it'd be helpful to have that first conversation as context. So I just put a link there.
By the way, Norik made this. This is more effort. At least visually. I put in effort research-wise, but not visually this much.
Yeah. Okay, so the pretext, or what the hell is a narco-terrorist? Because that's a line we've been hearing a lot. So if you want to go to the next one. I'm sure most viewers of your stream will understand the significance of this picture of former Secretary of State Colin Powell. Secretary of State, Defense, I forget.
Secretary of State.
Yeah, with an anthrax vial being like, oh, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. There is a pretext that's always given to justify domestically and internationally a military operation, just as, you know, the U.S. talked about weapons of mass destruction and combating terrorism, when really Iraq was primarily an exercise in democracy building, and, you know, people bring the usual stuff about Israel and all that. Or Russia talking about sort of like its historic claim to Ukraine, when really it's more of a sort of like geostrategic decision to take over eastern Ukraine, if not the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. right now is presenting a pretext on oil, resources, and drugs, which is accurate, but it doesn't actually paint the whole picture. There's a whole geopolitical dimension that's not being presented to the masses, perhaps understandably, because it's just going to be spun by the media in a negative light, and they're going to defend Maduro and his regime or whatever. But there's sort of like, as I see it, two major things happening here. Number one, a hemispheric alignment. In Latin America, we'll talk about that. And then sort of like international socialism and the fact that this regime isn't just narrowly looked at Maduro himself and the people who run the country of Venezuela, but sort of an important node in an international alliance, a sort of like remnant from the 20th century in the Soviet structure. That structure remains in place even after the Soviet Union has collapsed in Latin America, or rather remains in place in Latin America, and sort of acts of its own accord in contradiction to the interests of the United States. So the U.S. has been looking to get rid of Chavez and then Maduro for like 20 years. So this is nothing new. And then I also mentioned sort of Trump's narcissism, which is perhaps an uncharitable way of putting it, but we'll talk about that as well. So all of these are factors that went into the decision making. It's not as simple as what you're being told in the media, and I think most people here would understand that.
I think Trump decided to focus on the oil and drugs because those are two things like his base immediately cares about and understands. Like, absolutely. They understand fuel prices are high. They understand we have to ensure access to oil. Probably some of the smarter ones are like, we'd rather get it from Venezuela than the Middle East. And then drugs, everyone knows that's a problem. If you're like a conservative, you hate drugs, you hate drug dealers and cartels and stuff. So that those are probably decent themes. I just don't know how well they were actually conveyed.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one here is oil, and I'll say it's actually overblown. It's sort of like the general meme of Venezuela. If people know anything about it, is that it's poor and that it has oil. But actually, despite having the largest proven reserves in the world, number one, those numbers are not actually substantiated. The source of the 300 million barrel number is actually from an OPEC report that relies on a self-reported figure by the Venezuelan government. And
the
figure
Chavez
comes from
would lie?
Oh no, we know he lied because he he was facing a re-election campaign in 2006. He needed sort of like a win geopolitically because his opponent was looking up in the polls. So he commissioned the recently purged PDVSA, the state oil company, to put out a report saying we have so much oil that we can tap, so that he could court the support of China and Russia in the election to give him monetary support, and it worked. So we don't actually know the real number. There are estimates that it could be anywhere from 100 billion to 500 billion. We don't actually know the number. The 300 was just completely made up by the government. And that would actually make a big difference because if it's in the lower end of that, Venezuela is actually second in terms of reserves behind Saudi Arabia.
Just looking at this, because I'm Canadian, obviously. We have, I don't know what it is considered these days, but we do have really large oil reserves here. It's just, as with Venezuela, and I'm sure you'll talk about it, they aren't particularly efficient, cost-effective, or usable. But, like, on paper, reserves don't really have that much relationship to extractable reserves, at least at this point in time. They probably will in the future.
That's exactly right. It's all about your capacity to extract it. And that leads into my next point. Current production is actually under 1 million barrels a day, which is less than 1% of the global total. You'll see that bar graph over there. Those are the top four producers: the U.S., Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Canada. You can see Venezuela is completely negligible. If you include the entire global supply, it's anywhere from 80 to 100 million barrels every single day. Venezuela doesn't even crack 1% of that. So the idea that the U.S. is going to take the oil, quote unquote, and that this will have a meaningful impact on the price of oil or in the amount that China or Russia get, it's just absolutely false. It's true that Venezuelan oil is a geostrategic asset just because it's so close to the Gulf of Mexico. Sorry, the Gulf of America. That the U.S. can use it, but it's not a significant amount. And the other thing is that meaningfully increasing the production of oil from the current 1 million would be an undertaking that would take like a decade, even just to get it back to historic levels before Chavez. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Now, just before we continue, just something I had thought about this was maybe... I doubt Trump would think this way. This is a long-term thing. Because you always have all these movies, like sci-fi apocalyptic movies, where the world runs out of oil, like Fallout. So maybe this isn't so much in the foreseeable future, but in like a decade or two, if oil declines elsewhere, even if it's expensive, they can make sure that they still have access to some.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know if that's... if they're thinking that far ahead, but... to me, grabbing a resource that might not be profitable for a decade but will be necessary isn't that, like, crazy.
Yeah, fair enough. And as shown by this graph, Venezuela has historically produced a lot more oil than it does now. The peak, there were a couple peaks, one in the late 1970s, one in the 90s, where they were producing about 3.5 million barrels a day. This is with the help of a lot of... foreign companies, and actually, as you can see, part of the issue is the oil industry was nationalized in the late 70s, and then production plummeted, and then it picked back up once the companies were invited back to Venezuela to sort of help extract the difficult oil that's there. And then once Chavez takes over and purges the oil sector after the 2002 coup, which we talked about, you can see production has just been in a total nosedive. If you can go to the next slide real quick.
They really, I forgot about that. They gave it directly over to the military. They just said, okay, you guys can handle this.
Yeah, well, there was a coup, and basically anyone with a college degree backed the people trying to oust Chavez. And the moment he got back, he just kicked every single one of them out. And those were all the competent engineers and project managers at the oil company. So naturally, the people who are left are... lackeys who don't actually know what they're doing.
That's what happened during the Cultural Revolution. Actually, they replaced all the professionals with poorly educated soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, par for the course for communist regimes, right? So this is more recent production, and you can see it's just plummeted long before actually the sanctions that people complain about. The big sanctions that the U.S. imposed on Venezuelan oil didn't even kick in until 2019. And yes, so OFAC, that's I forget what it stands for. Those are the Office of Foreign Asset Control. Sorry, how the U.S. handles foreign resources, and so those refer to sanctions placed by the United States. And the big one was in 2019, where we just embargoed all Venezuelan oil and we could no longer buy it. You can see that like 90% of the decline actually happened before that tariff, or not tariff, sanction. So the idea that, we sanctioned oil, therefore Venezuela's poor, is just factually incorrect. And what's also funny is that Delcy Rodriguez, whom we'll talk about extensively later on, likes to brand herself as a reformist and someone who can work with institutions or whatever, and she claims that under her, oil production has significantly increased. She took over the petroleum ministry in 2024. So if you look at the last bit of that graph, that negligible increase in the second half.
I mean, that's something, I guess.
Yeah, and what actually happened there is in 2022, Joe Biden allowed Chevron to enter Venezuela and take some of the oil as part of a negotiated release of hostages. And that's actually the majority of the increase we've seen over the past 5 years has been because Chevron went back into the into Venezuelan fields. It has nothing to do with internal management of the company.
So just a side note, just because, and I've heard this point. If the socialist system in Venezuela is so great, why did they need to sell their oil to America? Like, why are they entitled to have America buy their oil and subsidize them? Did you get what I'm kind of saying? Like when people say it's poor and a disaster because of the sanctions,
right? I mean, it's a complete non sequitur.
It's like, okay, so you have to rely on a capitalist country that produces money to subsidize you.
Well, that's true of any regime that's sanctioned, right? Like people will make this argument about Iran and Cuba or whatever, and it's like, well, if you need capitalism for your country to survive, then it's not really the embargo that's killing you; it's the communism, right?
Right.
Anyway, so what's interesting about Venezuelan oil, and I'll just be brief about this, but it's the Orinoco Basin, which is that big blob you see down there in the middle of the country. That is actually the thickest, densest, most disgusting oil in the entire planet. It's actually technically not even considered crude. It's a substance called bitumen, which is thicker than the thickest grade of heavy
asphalt?
oil. Yes, it's basically tar, and it's extremely difficult to extract, which is why the departure of American and British petroleum companies has completely destroyed the production and extraction, because it's literally the hardest oil to extract in the entire planet.
Even harder than the stuff from the bottom of the ocean?
Oh, well, I mean, that's a different engineering challenge. I'm talking about the substance in itself, and not... Right. So that's like 65 to 80% of production, depending on the year you're looking at. So it would take decades of investment to get that oil, 65% of that oil back up, which is why it's been just shut out for the past 10 years. The majority of the oil we're getting now is from that northern blob in the east, the Maracaibo Lake Basin.
Also,
and that's much easier to extract.
For like the last decade or so? I could be misremembering. Yeah. Isn't per barrel prices fairly low at the moment?
Yeah, they are. Though it's a little complicated. If you go to the next slide, actually, there's an interesting tidbit about this, which is the Venezuelan oil is, as I mentioned, both sour and heavy. Heavy refers to the density, sour just the sulfur content of the oil, which makes it very difficult to process. When refining, you have to extract all the oil, because otherwise it won't meet the sulfur emission standards, especially after 2009, I think it was, when Obama increased the requirements. So because it's such a difficult source to process, but because there's so much of it, the United States in the 1990s, expecting that they would get a bunch of Venezuelan oil, build over 18 refineries in the Gulf of Mexico. This is a map of the density of oil refineries in the United States. You can see there's a bunch of them in Texas and Louisiana on the coast. Those are placed there specifically for to process Venezuelan crude. Obviously now in the mid 2000s, with the souring of tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela, a lot of that has been repurposed into processing Canadian crude, which is very similar in that it's heavy and sour. So there's actually, that's what those green lines are, pipelines that have been built between Canada, especially Alberta, and Texas, to replace the loss in Venezuelan crude with Canadian crude.
Although our country's dysfunctional, so I don't know if did any of those ever actually get built?
I think those are the ones that have been built.
Because it's been like a decade long. Like the Amerindians were like, we don't want you to build pipelines, and the federal government's like, oh well, we can't build them then.
Yeah, dude, actually, one of the funniest things is literally the day after the capture of Maduro, Polyev released a video being like, oh, Mark Carney needs to stop hindering the construction of pipelines because now we're going to lose the U.S. as a client. The implication being that those refineries in Texas are going to go back to refining Venezuelan crude, so Canada's crude, and they have zero leverage now over NAFTA negotiations, which is pretty funny.
Well, Fuentes thinks that that's one of the reasons is to remove any existing. I don't really think that's the case, but I've heard people say that part of this is to remove Canadian leverage.
He's not the first to make that point. Actually, a lot of people made that point. Peter Zion also said that, but it's just the reality is that it's not a lot of oil, but we could refine it. We have the technology and we have the rig, so it's literally just a matter of transporting it here, which is why the U.S. is saying, oh, we can take over the oil because we can process it. It's just a matter of extracting it. The second pretext is drugs. This is actually much more real than the oil thing just because it's more impactful, but a lot of people don't know about this. I've been looking at a lot of content from the left, from the right, from the New York Times, from Tucker Carlson, which is just embarrassing. I'll talk about that later. Even Nick Fuentes, and they all seem to dismiss the drug trafficking thing. It's actually, I think, in my analysis, a much bigger part of the situation than even the oil in terms of the actual national security interests of the United States. So I'll just briefly here. Chavez harbored drug traffickers from the very beginning. Even before he was selected, his dad was, a few people know this, his dad was the governor of Barinas, which is one of the states near the border with Colombia. And in the 1990s, when there was a massive crackdown against Pablo Escobar, the FARC militias, they're like communist militias that were involved in the traffic of cocaine and in the production of cocaine, fled into Venezuela, and they were given harbor by the Chavez family long before he was even president. So that relationship has been there from the start, and it's just a matter of over the ensuing 25 years, it's been formalized and become a part of the revenue stream of the Venezuelan government. So much so, actually, that Chavez kicked out the DEA from Venezuela in 2005. So it sort of tells you, like, why would you kick out the main drug enforcement agency in the world?
Now, do they also provide FARC with, like, military and economic support? Or they just let them? Okay, because I hear people say that they don't, and they just ignore them when they're operating across the border. My understanding was that Venezuela was funding leftist guerrillas across Latin America. I've seen a lot of people say that that's a myth.
We'll talk about that later, but even in the 2008, the equivalent of the State of the Union address is a very infamous line where Chavez is like, oh yeah, the FARC, the ELN, these are misunderstood groups that are our allies in the revolution. And everyone's like, what the fuck do you mean our allies? Because these groups obviously have been sanctioned to hell and have been the vein of the existence of the entire South American continent for like 30 years. So that was very telling, and like more recent reports pretty much corroborate exactly that they've been funding them and giving them money and giving them free reign. If you can go to the next slide.
Sure.
The cartel of the suns is a phrase that's been used a lot recently, and no one, I think, in the English-speaking world had even heard of it until this year or the year before. Yeah, if you're fluent in the Spanish-speaking media, this is a well-known term. It's actually from the 90s, even before Chavez. The sun insignia that you see there is actually the symbol of the generals of the Venezuelan military. And it was a euphemism started in the 90s because everybody knew that as the FARC was coming in from Colombia in the mid-90s, that the Venezuelan military was not only well aware, but actually there were a lot of corruption cases involved where people were cooperating with the distribution of cocaine. So in the mid-2000s, this relationship becomes formalized. There's a handful of very important figures that we'll figure later on this presentation. Diosdado Cabello is the biggest one. Tarek Al-Aissami, I actually mentioned in the last stream, he's the guy who was selling Venezuelan passports to Iraqi combatants in the mid-2010s. These two people become sort of the head logistics people of formalizing the trade routes that the Colombian cartels were using in Venezuela, and actually assigning specific Venezuelan generals to each region. So that'd be like, oh, General whatever, you're going to take this region. General whatever, you're going to take this region. And they would actually kill this is insane. This is what this picture is. So you see that's suspect air activity. What's bizarre about that is you see a lot of flights emanating from the Colombian border. The DEA noticed that soon after they were kicked out of the United States, a lot of their main suspects were dying. So people they'd been tracking for like 10 years, trying to get them on drug trafficking charges, were dropping like flies, dying. And they're like, what's going on? However, the air travel routes that they were flying were getting more crowded. So it's like, how can the drug traffickers be dying, but there's more flights? And they tried intercepting some of these flights, and they realized they were Venezuelan military aircraft. So this is basically, and this has been corroborated by evidence that came in the Trump 1 administration. What they were doing is they were killing the drug traffickers, taking over and monopolizing the routes, and then using military aircraft to fly the routes and fly the cocaine to like Honduras and Haiti and Puerto Rico. And because they were military aircraft, under international law, they could not be shut down by the United States. So it's a perfect loophole to cover the cocaine trade. And this became a significant part of the Venezuelan state revenue.
That sounds very... Have you seen the movie Elite Squad 2?
I have not.
Okay, because it's a Brazilian movie, and they, like, the right-wing politicians form, like, a paramilitary death squad to take out the cartels, and then they do, and then they take over, and they run the drug trafficking business way more efficiently.
Yeah, and of course it'd be the right-wing people in the movie. The literal exact opposite happened in real life, yeah. Yeah, so... of course, you can't run an operation like this with state resources for 20 years and not expect people to start leaking information, especially when there's a lot of money involved. So the first guy, Liam C. Salazar, the guy in the red circle in the left picture there, he was actually the head security detail for Chavez and later for Diosdado Cabello. So imagine being basically the personal security guard of the leader of this entire operation. The DEA had a big target on his back, and they extradited him, or rather, he defected because he was betrayed by the Shah. It's a whole thing, but basically, he defected and became a protected witness to the DEA, and a lot of the information that the United States government has on this operation came from him. There's also Colombian narcos, like this guy. I did not put his name. Sad. But basically, a lot of people have been extradited, and even Popeye Velasquez, that's Escobar's sicario, like his private hitman, he revealed, we pretty much know all this, and we've cooperated with him. So this is well established, and anybody in the Spanish media knows exactly about this, or the extent of this.
So, something I want to ask, where is the money, where did the drugs actually go? Because I've heard people say all of it goes to Europe. Is that true? Does a lot of it also go to the U.S. or?
Yeah, so this is another way in which the data is obscured, and because these are, there's no like formal report coming from the UN. It's like these are the routes or whatever. Like this is all clandestine operations, so it's hard to know for certain. But what we do know is that people will make the argument, Venezuela only consists of like 20% of the cocaine entering the U.S., so it's not a big deal. Number one, that's still a ton of cocaine. And number two, this is easily misleading because if you look at the picture before, in the slide before, if you look at those routes, they start from the Venezuela-Colombia border. Some of those go to different Caribbean islands. Some of them go to Honduras or to Mexico. And the way a lot of those statistics are tracked about the origin of the cocaine entering the United States is the last country it was in before it entered. So there's cocaine that's coming through Mexico, but that actually originated in Colombia and was transported through Venezuela.
I think, is that Honduras the one where it's all going into?
Yes.
Okay, because looking at this, almost all of it seems to be going through Honduras, and with a significant part going through Haiti and Dominican Republic. So it would be tracked as being from Honduras and not from Venezuela, even though the Venezuelan army's the ones who are running the operation.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that goes to Honduras eventually makes its way through Mexico, whereas a lot of the stuff that goes to the Caribbean eventually ends up in Europe. That's the usual breakdown. Most of it does end up in Europe, but it's a much more even split than people want to admit.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yeah, and eventually this becomes so profitable that once oil revenue collapses in as part of the income in Venezuela, drug trafficking actually becomes the biggest source of revenue. As of 2025, it's estimated that around 56% of the Venezuelan state revenue actually comes from illicit trade, and that's not just drugs; it's also rich uranium that they sell to a number of places, including North Korea and Iran. So that's epic.
I remember in Narcos when Pablo Escobar is in exile. I think people forget just how profitable drugs are. He's like, "I'll pay off half the national debt if you let me come back." Like he had enough money to pay off the national debt. Like I think people, it's insane how profitable drugs are.
I mean, they were burning money in the 90s because they had so much of it that they had no idea what to do with it, or they were burying it. They're still to this day finding like just suitcases of cash of American dollars laced with cocaine in the middle of like the Colombian countryside. So it's a ton. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's not just drugs. It's, as I said, uranium and a bunch of rare earth minerals are trafficked in these routes. If you've heard of the shadow fleet, it's a term that's been used a lot to describe Russian oil tankers trying to escape sanctions after 2022. A lot of the same oil tankers of the Russian fleet are actually used by Venezuela to transport stuff to Europe, and that includes uranium, and it includes also weapons that go eventually to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is actually one of the main clients of the Venezuelan regime in terms of their income. I think it's like 60% comes from Iran. Actually, nearly 40% comes from Venezuela, including a lot of the weapons as well. So a little tidbit that's seldom discussed here.
So it's just kind of the locust of crime, like in the Western Hemisphere. Maybe that's going a bit too far, but just the way you're telling it, it sounds like just a ton of stuff is just based there.
Oh yeah, no, and I actually have a slide on that a little bit next. But in 2017, this is from 2020. The U.S. puts out this. Extensive report with this very famous slide. This is when they announced the first bounties on the heads of 5 people initially. Actually, Maduro starts with 15 million. All the other people here in red have 10 million, including Claver Alcala. He was actually extradited through Colombia, funnily enough, in 2019. Diosdado Cabello, he's now basically the shadow president. Hugo Carvajal, they call him El Pollo, the chicken, because he looks really funny. He was also extradited to the U.S., and Tarek Al-Isami was actually imprisoned in Venezuela. There's a funny story about that. If you go next.
I'm not going to lie, Maduro always looked like the dopey dad figure from like a Hispanic sitcom. I don't know if he gives you that vibe too.
Oh no, it's not just you actually. That's everybody knows that he was chosen sort of like to be the goofball, so that people would laugh at him and not take him too seriously. But the actual shadow president, we'll talk about him later. So El Pollo is this character who was director of basically the CIA of Venezuela, the Central Intelligence Agency, and he gets snaked by Delcy, actually, funnily enough, when Delcy takes over his job and basically says, "Oh, by the way, I'm taking all your money and you're getting turned into the U.S." So he escapes, he flees, he goes into hiding in Spain. Eventually, he's extradited to the U.S. And he's so pissed at how they snaked him that he writes his letter this year actually to Trump, being like, "Hey, by the way, if you want to catch these people, this is what they're doing," and he corroborates pretty much everything we already know about the Tren de Aragua, the gang that infiltrated the U.S. I don't know if you remember in Colorado, there are like incidents of Venezuelan gangs taking over apartment buildings.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I forgot they were Venezuelan, but I had heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, those were actually, that particular incident was ordered by the Venezuelan government as a show of strength, to show that they had infiltrated the United States with their gangs. So this guy corroborates exactly how that happened in that letter. He talked about how migration is used by Venezuela as a way of transporting criminals, not just Venezuelan gangs, but even like Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS. All these people are being given Venezuelan passports, and you know, when you see those caravans going into the southern border, or they go into like Chile or Argentina, the Venezuelan government is infiltrating those caravans with tons of their criminals and allies.
Just
there's also
just the narrative that I always hear, and if I just keep it, because I think you're the person to respond to these, is that the people are fleeing the country because U.S. sanctions and interference has led to widespread starvation, and the people are just trying to escape for a better life, and that this is not a deliberate policy of the Venezuelan government. It's just a result of what the U.S. has done.
Yeah. Well, those two things are not mutually exclusive, right? Like 9 million people, most of those are just, people like me, right? Like who have just left because the country has become completely unlivable. But it is the deliberate policy of the government to use that migratory flow to infiltrate different countries. So the two are not mutually exclusive, and that's what complicates the issue.
Someone asked, how are ISIS and Hezbollah both working with the Venezuelan government? If they're more...
Sorry, if I said ISIS, I misspoke. I'm just talking about general Islamic militia. So a lot of them Shia and Iranian-backed. So sorry, definitely not ISIS.
Okay.
Hezbollah, actually, an interesting point on that. They actually, one of the things that was corroborated in this letter that the U.S. suspected since 2020 is that there's an island off the coast of Venezuela called Margarita, which used to be a sort of like tropical resort place. It has actually been converted into a Hezbollah training camp, and we have GPS confirmation of this. But this guy corroborates. It's like, yeah, actually, especially since Israel started doing a lot of the strikes in 2024, a lot of those operations have moved to Venezuela for their training grounds, which is
okay. Because I have to look into that more because I've heard that. It's just I'm always suspicious of that because this is used as the justification for like everything that Hezbollah or Hamas or anti-Israel activity, and that's the reason we have to go in. Is it more than ideology just that Venezuela is kind of like Libya, wherein anybody who they think can give them money or be politically useful, they will just harbor?
There is an element of that cynicism where they are just taking whatever money and influence they can get. And I think actually Delcy Rodriguez are like snaking on everyone and cooperating with the U.S. is a perfect example of this, right? Like they'll just do whatever they think gives them power. But it is ideological for sure. And Chavez was actually a big friend of the Iranian regime in the mid-2000s. So this is not without precedent. And this is he deliberately chose those alliances. And Chavez was famously a big supporter of Palestine in the Western Hemisphere. So... And this is where things get a lot complicated, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, this is a war for Israel. And people will laugh at that. There is actually a much bigger connection that people would care to admit, because Venezuela is the primary ally of Iran in the Western Hemisphere. So there is truth to that.
With BRICS, though, I never really know how much of it is an alliance of convenience, where they're just all enemies of the U.S., and how much of it is they genuinely like each other at all.
Well, they like each other because they're ideologically opposed to the U.S. It's both.
No, but like I feel like with Russia and India, they're more actual friends than some of these other coalitions that get thrown together.
Yeah, that's fair. The Iranian thing is very unpopular domestically in Venezuela, but it's like one of the central tenets of the government. So, I mean, make it that way you will.
Okay, I just want you to respond. Someone in chat is saying... you're regurgitating CIA talking points.
Of course. Yeah, this is always the accusation. And I mean, let's be transparent about that. It's not a CIA talking point, but it is a fact that the CIA wants to leverage because it's true and it benefits their interests. So, and we'll talk about this later with Maria Corina Machado or whatever. People, oh, she's a CIA, Zog, whatever. She is a genuine actor. The Venezuelan opposition do really just want to get rid of these people, and they will use whatever leverage they can. And if it's like, hey, look, USA, these people are Iranian allied. You hate Iran, right? Go kick them. Like, that is how they operate. They will, and it's not like, therefore they are a CIA plant. That is a marriage of convenience.
Something I will say is just because the CIA is largely these days incompetent and focuses on attacking conservative governments to spread pause, doesn't mean they aren't right in some cases. Like, it doesn't. It's not a one or the other. Like, Venezuela can be involved in all of this stuff, and a lot of the stuff they make up about Russia be false. Like, it's not a one for one thing. And I think people, because they're so tired of being lied to, just will take the side of Venezuela and assume that the CIA is lying, which I can understand. Like, I'm sympathetic to that. I just think to a certain extent you have to have a bit of an open mind with this.
Right. And you know, the facts are what they are, whether or not they benefit the CIA or the Chinese Iranian side. Like, that's, I don't know. I think it's a losing battle, talking that argument, because, as you said, like, it can both be true that, like, they're speaking the truth and they're using it cynically for their own interests.
No, I mean, it can be like they can lie about stuff going on in other parts of the world, but this might actually be happening.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect segue into geopolitics, because this is so we talked about the pretext, right? Like, they're talking about the oil and the drugs, but the subtext is, I think, much more important. And so if you can go next, Venezuela, as we were talking about, is the gateway to South America. During World War II and the Korean War, most of the oil that was used by the U.S. was actually coming from Venezuela. This is a really old strategic partnership. And the Soviet side actually was keenly aware of this and wanted to kneecap that from the start. Cuba, as soon as they took over, or as soon as Fidel took over Cuba, their very first tactical operation was actually in Venezuela. In 1962, they gave money to a bunch of militias. And in 1967, they actually attempted a ground invasion. This is not well known. The Machurucuto raid is how, I'm not even going to attempt to spell that out. So Cuba has been attempting to invade and take over the resources in Venezuela just so they can kneecap the United States for a long time. And this was back when the oil production in Venezuela was much more significant part of the U.S. Supply overall, long before those big agreements in the mid-'60s and early '70s with Saudi Arabia. And there's actually, perfect. Go to the next slide. There's a great documentary. It's in Spanish. The captions are okay in English. And it talks about Rómulo Betancourt. He was like one of the first, they call him the founder of Venezuelan democracy. And this documentary goes in detail about how he was trying to, like, navigate both not being taken advantage of by the U.S., but also repelling Cuban and Soviet influence. It's a super interesting documentary. It's like 2 hours. If people want to watch that. So once Chavez takes power, a lot of those same resources and influence becomes a patronage network for basically the enemies of the United States. And this is the real reason the United States has been wanting regime change for over 20 years, right? If you look at who their clients are, it includes Cuba and Nicaragua. Actually, Cuba, after the Soviet Union falls, enters what's called the special period. That's just a euphemism for everyone is starving and people are dying. Mm-hmm. And that's why they attempt to give support to the Chavez's coup in 92 and eventually support his campaigning 98. For the first 10 years, he was actually giving them oil for free, like 50,000 barrels every single day for free. Eventually, he just sells it to them under market price, and that's what's been happening to this day. He also supports socialist parties in Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, like basically every country in Latin America. So Petro, the current president right there, a lot of his campaign funds actually came from Maduro. He was the biggest donor. Brazil, Lula da Silva was one of Chavez's biggest allies, and he's the president, the one who imprisoned Bolsonaro. He was one of Chavez's proteges. Cristina Kirchner in Argentina, the lady whose party Milei defeated. These were all big Chavez allies, and a lot of their funding came from Venezuela. AMLO and Scheinbaum in Mexico also are allies of Venezuela, as has been confirmed. El Chapo Guzman, he's like the biggest narco trafficker in Mexico. He was personal friends with Chavez and Maduro. And as I mentioned, Hezbollah, IRGC, a number of Islamist militias. Interestingly, though, also a lot of Western socialist parties, and this is something that's less discussed. The PSOE, the Partido Socialista in Spain, is actually has known ties, and we'll get into this later. There's a big scandal where Delcy Rodriguez gave like 40 suitcases full of gold to one of the ministers for the current sitting government in Spain right now. It's a big scandal. The guy went to jail.
Way to go about it. Like, like it's just the suitcases full of. I don't know.
Dude, the most fucked up thing. I'm sorry for the cursing. There's an infamous video that came out in like 2018, 2019. Have you heard of Dubai chocolate?
No.
The reason the UAE has been pushing Dubai chocolate, which is chocolate with pistachios, is because the original Dubai chocolate was a euphemism used on the internet for videos of Saudi princes doing sex stuff with feces.
I can imagine.
So there's an infamous video of one of these Dubai chocolate parties where the oil sheiks are having a party with prostitutes or whatever, and it's on a table full. It's like a glass table, and underneath is a bunch of like gold bars. If you look at the symbol of the gold bars, it's actually the symbol of the Central Bank of Venezuela.
Okay.
Oh. And so in the mid-2000s, Chavez takes the gold reserves from New York City and from Switzerland and puts them in Venezuela. And he's like, oh, for the sovereignty of the country, whatever, right? And of course, we all know that's actually happening with that gold is he's using it to fund his clients throughout the world. And Dubai is the perfect place to launder that gold, because if you go to the Dubai airport, they take gold with no questions asked. So a lot of the clients of the Venezuelan regime will do stuff with gold in Dubai. So anyway, if you go back, there's also something else I wanted to point out. BLM and the DSA are actually funded by the Maduro regime in part. And that last picture, it's kind of hard to tell. It looks like a big meeting in Venezuela. That was actually last year. The Democratic Socialists of America flew, which by the way is illegal. Like the Venezuelan or American citizens are forbidden from entering Venezuela. But these guys had an exception made for them because the Maduro regime gives them, and you can look this up. There's like streams of this on Twitter. Of the DSA having a party in the Maduro palace and being like, oh, look, Venezuela's so great. So their influence is even in domestically in the United States.
Yeah, because I know China also supports BLM. I was watching Putin put out a video, and it had all kinds the other day. And I like Putin in general, but it just had a whole bunch of like post-colonial. It gets kind of cringe.
China. Speaking of China, is the biggest beneficiary of this. And that map over there, so the BIR, the Belt and Road Initiative, I'm sure you've heard of it, is China's strategic initiative to build infrastructure throughout the world. They're not doing this out of charity. This is what's called dual-use infrastructure. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have been talking about this. I think Nick Fuentes actually on his stream talked about this.
Yeah, he went into that in depth, yeah.
Yeah, there's like 38 deep water ports that China has been building throughout the world, including 18 of them in the Caribbean. One of them in Venezuela, one in Cuba, one in Nicaragua, and throughout. A couple in Panama, actually, interestingly enough. These are exactly the dimensions that would need to be to accommodate the Chinese naval fleet. So the U.S. has been shitting its pants once the first one of these was built in Cuba, because this is like Bay of Pigs 2.0. So if these are built to specification, they can nuke like Cape Canaveral and all the space-faring operations the U.S. has are completely gone.
China also just has much, much greater shipbuilding capacity. So it's possible in the future they will overtake the U.S. in fleet size.
Who knows, right? Because the U.S. spent so much money. But if you go to the next slide, this, more than anything else, I think is the primary... oh, great, the PowerPoint is broken. So I wrote right aligned and left aligned. I think that's incorrect, actually. I think it'd be better to say America aligned versus China aligned.
Okay.
China just completely swept through from like 2019, 2018 through 2023. And they basically took over the entirety of Latin America in terms of the parties they support and the agreements they made. Argentina was actually about to join BRICS before Milei joined, and that's part of the reason why the United States shielded him so hard. So as you can see, from 2023 to 2026, there has actually been a reverse bounce. And part of that has been, funnily enough, the Venezuelan diaspora has been so...
abrasive?
Damaging to a lot of these countries that people are like, fuck, we need to send these people back. So they've actually started voting in a lot of right-wing governments throughout, especially places with large Venezuelan populations like Argentina, Chile, Peru. There's elections this year in both Brazil and Colombia, and they're both expected to go to the right. So I think the intention of the United States is to use this operation to make sure that, like, you know, if Venezuela falls, Cuba falls, Nicaragua falls, and that by 2029, when the Trump administration ends, the entire hemisphere, will, except for maybe Mexico because they're more intransigent, will become American aligned. That's the hope in light of sort of like the deterioration of NATO, that this hemisphere can become America's backyard. And we don't have to watch this video. It's like 2 minutes long. But it's basically Marco Rubio saying literally everything I just said. Oh.
Okay. No, that's probably not going to work, but it's okay.
Yeah, we tried.
Okay, just.
But yeah, so it's really funny because I do all this research, and then literally yesterday, Marco Rubio does a press release saying literally everything I just said, which is, you know, like, yeah, we talked about the oil or whatever, but that's been such a disaster internationally because people are like, oh, it's U.S. imperialism or whatever, so they clarify. Like, number one, we care about securing the oil. Number two, we care about the narco traffic, and he lists most of the things I mentioned. And then number three, he talks about geostrategic alignment. But more importantly, I think, to this whole operation isn't because the U.S. has wanted Venezuela regime change for 20 years. So why now? And my response would be Trump being Trump. So Donald Trump, larger than life figure, sort of like pictures himself as like the man who did things that nobody thought could be done. And he finds himself hamstringed in his second administration by the administrative state and the courts and the judges, right? He can't get anything done, even by his own Congress. So I think a lot like Nixon found himself hamstringed by the difficult gridlock in domestic American politics. He's finding himself that the only area where he can really build a legacy is foreign policy. I think this is an underappreciated factor for why he's so invested in Iran, besides all the usual influence. But it's also part of the reason I think he is adamant in doing something in Venezuela, because he can claim that he ended another war and killed all these dictators or whatever. I think that's an underappreciated factor. And this picture, I think, speaks 1,000 words.
Okay, just before we get into this, so there's a thing with lol cows wherein when they're like desperate and they're begging for money, someone will get them to send them their silver or gold play button, and they will hold that as like a power move over them, like as a humiliation ritual. And it kind of reminds me of this, like that Machado or whatever is sending her gold play button to Trump. That's like a sign of submission.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, like, it's really funny. We'll get into this later. Like, Trump says, or at least the forward-facing reason for why he's working with the interim government right now, which is literally just Maduro's VP instead of Machado, is because Machado, she doesn't have the support.
She doesn't have the respect.
I mean, yeah, like, what it actually was is Trump has been wanting the eternal boomer, has been wanting the Nobel Peace Prize for this entire year. He's been talking about, I ended the war in Ukraine. He didn't. He says he's ended 6 wars.
I think it's up. It's more than that now. He's like, I don't know, 12. Maybe.
So he was mad that she won the Nobel Peace Prize. We'll get into why that happened. And Maria Corina Machado, like you can say whatever you want about her. She's a kiss ass, and she is, desperate for the U.S. to back her. So in the ultimate move of desperation, she was like, "Oh, Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize. I'll give him the Nobel Peace Prize." And she does it like gleefully and proudly, which is just, I don't know. I think it's extremely embarrassing.
This is the shoe-in for the RG for cringe of the year for 2026. Like, it's just looking at it.
Yeah.
So is this basically Trump wouldn't put her in power because she won the Nobel Peace Prize and he was jealous? So she's giving it to him in a desperate attempt to get him to support her?
That's how it reads.
It's...
I don't know what other interpretation you can have of that picture, dude.
I don't know. It's so goofy.
Yeah. I've not been looking at the chat, but I just wanted to say, because people are saying, oh, these are the CIA talking points, whatever. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not telling you my opinion necessarily. I'm telling you, like, these are the facts that the United States is using to justify its intervention. Like, this is the American perspective. Like, why Trump is trying to regime change Venezuela. These are the talking points. Like, I don't know what people want.
Okay. Just keep going. I'll just be back in 1 sec.
Yeah. So just a little bit of context. As I mentioned, the United States has been wanting regime change for over 20 years now in Venezuela. Obama actually was the one who began sanctions. So most of those sanctions were specifically targeted at the people who now have bounties on their head, like Diosdado Cabello and Padrino Lopez, all these people who the U.S. wants their head on a plate, basically. Obama actually confiscated a bunch of property that they had in the United States in 2014. That did not work, not terribly well. So in 2019, a couple of interesting things happened. Number one is when Trump applies the so-called maximum pressure sanctions, which are basically the U.S. Embargoing Venezuelan oil. And that's when they lose customers for like 200 million or 200,000 barrels of oil every single day. Argent, are you there? Okay, I guess he's not there. The most interesting thing that happens during this time is that the U.S. actually does not recognize Maduro as a legitimate president of Venezuela because of the constitutional crisis. So I'm sure you guys will remember. Oh, hello?
Yep, I'm back.
Yeah, okay. I was just talking about sanctions and how Obama started them, Trump intensified them. In 2019, I'm sure you'll remember this. The U.S. actually does not recognize Maduro as the legitimate president of the United States of Venezuela, and it hasn't for 7 years. This started with a constitutional crisis in 2019, where they just said, "Oh, the president of the Congress is actually the president," and that did not work. This is actually not the first American-backed operation to try to kidnap Maduro. In 2020, there was Operation Gideon. A lot of people don't remember this. This is actually planned by Juan Guaido, the clown interim president from the Congress, who attempted to get Venezuela or American mercenaries to capture Maduro. So it's literally a gang of like 3 Americans and 7 Venezuelans, and they went on a boat and they're like, "We're gonna capture Maduro," and they got
from
captured.
Stormfront like the last time, like Operation Red Dog.
Yeah, dude, it is literally like it's the most obvious like fed up on planet Earth. It obviously did not work. They got captured in like 5 minutes, and they would rather just sweep that under the rug. Eventually, though, Venezuela or the United States starts taking a more conciliatory tone, and actually, Trump administration has had a sort of what do you call it, bipolar or I don't know, like schizophrenic approach to Venezuela, where they actually want to negotiate as opposed to just pretending like, "Oh, Maduro, who's that? He's not the president." This actually started under Biden. The Barbados and Doha agreements of 2022 were basically, will release Venezuelan narcos that we have captured in the U.S. And in return, will allow you to sell us oil. The implication being sort of like the Biden administration decides it's not worth it trying to regime change these guys because they're so entrenched. and we have no way of how to extract Maduro. So what we're going to do is we're just going to enter into a strategic alignment. We're going to try to pull them into the American sphere of influence, and we're trying to get them to sell oil to us instead of to China. So, which is funny because that's actually the approach that's being openly discussed by Trump.
Didn't Maduro dare the U.S. to kidnap him?
That was in 2025, more recently.
That actually, it's just sometimes with Maduro, it's hard for me to tell if stuff actually happened or not because of how just wacky he is. So he literally just come get me, and then they did.
Yeah. Oh no, dude, it's hilarious. In the Venezuelan internet, there's memes of because this was on national television. He's like, "Mr. War, no more war," and a terrible English, just being "Come and take me, bitch. No war, no whatever. You can't do it. You're too much of a pussy." And then he goes and does it, which is pretty funny. And then 2025, as I mentioned, Trump attempted talks with Maduro. He actually sent Rick Grinnell early in the year, February 1st, 2025, to negotiate and be like, hey, let's do a minerals deal, kind of like with Ukraine, where we're not going to attempt to regime change you. We're just going to take the oil, and you're going to stand down and stop collaborating with Iran or whatever. This failed.
I don't know. I'm going to have to push
failed.
back a bit, because didn't Maduro agree to everything, and then Trump said no?
So the thing is, Maduro, what's difficult is that he publicly did not cooperate with the demands, but the oil started flowing. So it's one of those things where he probably did actually accede to a lot of the demands.
No, but Rick Grinnell, I think, has said that he agreed to everything. So
yeah, he said he agreed to things, and then he never followed through. Part of the agreement was to release political prisoners. He never did that. Part of the agreement was to honor the 2024 elections, and of course, you're not going to do that. So they originally agreed to a lot of things, and then they never followed through on a lot of it. And that's when people speculate that when his bounty was up to 50 million, what actually happened is that people within Maduro's circle now revealed, basically, it's confirmed that it was Delcy, right? Because she now is the interim president. Mm-hmm. And it would make sense because she's the sort of the Secretary of State. She's the one who deals with foreign leaders. It's speculated that they struck a deal where Maduro and Diosdado would be transferred to they would be given asylum in Russia or Turkey or some third country, and then a transitional government would take form. And that was actually from a leaked correspondence with the Vatican, where the Pope, but a lot of people don't know this, Pietro Parolin, who was one of the papabile last year, he was actually the nuncio to Venezuela from 2009 to 2013. And he had a meeting with JD Vance where he was like, hey, can you, don't invade these people. Can we just give them asylum or whatever? And that was actually the original deal, but it seems like things changed behind the scenes, and somebody within the government must have snaked on them and been like, actually just take him instead.
Could it also, to be charitable, could it also be the Trump admin was just these guys are clowns? We can't work with them.
And again, because they agreed to all the concessions and then they never followed through, it's entirely possible that they felt betrayed. It's not a coincidence that the military ramp up and the up bounty all happened at the same time. It's likely that there were negotiations and they fell through.
Because the narrative I heard is Rick Grinnell went, they agreed to everything, they took it back to Trump, and Trump said, no, we don't accept your surrender, we're going to invade or whatever. That's just the way the timeline is presented. They didn't give Maduro a chance to follow through on anything. So you're arguing, and I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with it, that they did, and he didn't do any of the stuff, the good faith gestures that would have indicated that he was actually going to go along with it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes. And eventually, things take a very drastic turn because all of a sudden, it goes from 0 to 70, and it's bounties upped. A bunch of the American fleet, the USS Iwo Jima, the Gerald Ford, all the big
aircraft carriers.
Yes, thank you. Are moved from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, and everyone's like, what? And then they start striking the drug dinghies. the boats and from September through now, and then they start actually seizing the oil tankers. You wouldn't have to do that if you thought that these people were cooperating with you. So obviously something changed behind the scenes, and we don't exactly know.
Well, I don't know. It's just, to me, they might have just decided they wanted regime change, or it might have been a neocon thing. Or I've heard that you have a lot more to get into, so I won't hold you up too much. Just, I had heard that Rubio rejected it because he hates communists, and he didn't want to let Maduro stay in power.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. I watched your most recent video, like the different factions arising within the Trump administration. I think that tracks. It's pretty accurate.
So just another question. So, what was the deal with the vessels? Because the narrative that Trump administration had is these were drug smugglers, but a lot of people are saying these were just innocent fishermen the U.S. decided to kill. So, like, in your opinion, were some of them, or like, how do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just an innocent fisherman, why go several kilometers in water into a known drug trafficking route? That's very obviously how they camouflage themselves, because they don't want to be caught, or just the resources they have. Like,
right, but people might argue that, like, that's the legal area. Was it Venezuela territorial waters?
Yes.
Okay, well then they have a legal right to be there. Would be the argument. I mean, just because people were arguing, and I think this is fair, that if these really were drug boats, the Coast Guard should have interdicted at least a couple of them, and proved that there was drugs on them. I don't mind killing drug traffickers. I do think that was a legitimate point, though.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Venezuela actually shares a maritime border with Puerto Rico. So there's a legal gray area where some of the attacks or some of the bombs actually happened in Puerto Rican territorial waters, which are American territorial waters. So
I just would have preferred if they had have grabbed a couple and just said, yeah, these have drugs on them.
And that's fair, right? Like, the Trump administration obviously does not care about international law.
Well, no, I don't mean international. I just mean, like, that it's not fake. I would be more, like, I would have been, if they were able to definitively prove to me that they were smuggling drugs, I would have no trouble with them being blown up. I do kind of get the criticism that they're just blowing random boats up and we don't really know.
But why would they do that?
Because Trump wants to look tough.
I don't know. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because obviously that would be a big. Well, it is a big international. What do you call it? Not conspiracy words. Yeah.
I don't know. I think.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy that necessarily.
Okay. I won't. We have a bunch to get to, so I won't hold. I just wanted to make my statement on that.
No, that's fair. So then all that buildup eventually culminates in what nobody expected, which is, I mean, I'm sure everybody watching has seen this. And I was going to get into a lot of detail, but actually, if you go to the very next slide right now, this is a fantastic video that I came across in my research. People should just go watch this. If they take nothing else from this stream, go watch this video. This is awesome. This is a munitions guy just talking for like 2 hours about, like, the technology they used, the timeline of the events, the helicopters, and even the speculated hypersonic weapons. I thought it was a wonderful video, just talking about the timeline of how they parked the aircraft carriers, and then they it wasn't an indiscriminate raid. They targeted very specific air defense systems, anti-air missiles and such. And they actually shut down the power grid of Venezuela for like 2 hours while they were doing this whole thing. So a lot of people found out, because it's like, oh, power went out. That's weird. And they started hearing like helicopter wings. Well, but that doesn't sound like our ghetto little helicopters go. Brrr. It's more like very clearly much more advanced technology. And things start blowing up. And then before they know it, there's the pictures of Maduro being captured. And it's like, what the hell just happened? A lot of people thought it was AI actually at first, because it was so surreal how quickly, you know, like, when have you heard of an operation like that takes 2 hours and they capture a foreign head of state? I think it's unprecedented, and it's whatever else people want to say about this. Like, it was badass.
I'm gonna be honest. It sounds like a Metal Gear Solid game. Absolute Resolve. MGS7 Absolute Resolve.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much just because it's been such a long stream already, and we have a lot more to get through. But I just thought if people want a breakdown of that, that's a great video to do it. So what happens now? There's the Venezuelan side and the American side. In the American side, Trump very unhelpfully or unclearly said, we're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. What? So, and that's the biggest incognito, right? With this whole operation, it's like, all right, you took the head of state.
That
Why?
press
Very
conference,
clearly-
if people haven't watched it, was insane. Just, it was bizarre.
The funniest thing, I don't know if you saw, there's a moment, I forget what the question was, but somebody asked Trump like a technical question about like the proceeding of what happens next, and he just like very nervously like does a hand signal to Marco Rubio. It's like, hey, can you take over? I have no idea what they're asking. Yeah, they basically said we're gonna be running the country, and people freaked out, and people didn't really know what that meant. We still don't really know what that meant.
Nobody knows.
Because a transition implies what? A change. Mm-hmm. What type of change? A regime change. However, that's not what happened. They just took the figurehead of a much deeper regime that has like several paramilitary branches and a cartel, and like just switching out the guy and having the exact. It'd be kind of like if, I don't know, Putin kills Joe Biden and Kamala takes the presidency. He's like, haha, we did regime change in the U.S. No, you didn't. So very obviously, if they want a transition, that implies that this isn't the last of it. This is just the beginning, and it's part of a negotiated sort of like leverage tactic of like, hey, if you don't cooperate, we're going to do this to you as well. And that's actually what they implied in the press conference. They said, we can take out any of you if you want. So Rubio eventually had to do a press conference because no one had any idea what any of this meant, and he described it as 3 separate phases that can be overlapping. The first is stabilization, which is that the U.S. is going to take the oil, and the proceeds of the oil, like, it'll be sold at market rates to the United States, and that money will not be taken by the Venezuelan government. It'll be taken by the U.S. To manage investment into Venezuela so that the oil can be extracted effectively. So basically it's saying, like, we're going to invest this money for you because we don't trust you to not just pocket the whole thing.
To be fair, I could see why. Like, it sounds like a scam, but given the Venezuelan government, I kind of can't blame them.
Right. And again, from the American perspective, like, what, they're just going to fund, like, the Hezbollah in Cuba or whatever. Like, they know the way the money flows, and their interest, at least in the stabilization part, is making sure that the flow of oil continues. So they want to make sure that whatever money is being spent in making that oil keep flowing. They want to attempt getting American oil firms to invest in Venezuela, which is actually the first roadblock to this. Is Trump the following week met with the executives from like ExxonMobil and all these other companies, and told them, hey, I need you to invest about $100 billion in 3 years. And they all said, no, thanks. They also reopened the U.S. embassy. And sorry, we were talking earlier about sort of like not necessarily trusting the Trump administration to do this competently. And I think this is going to be the first roadblock if they want the stabilization to happen first and they want to get the investment going. It's not going to happen until there is actual regime change. So I think that creates an incentive to have a democratic election and ousting the government, and that's going to get really messy. The second step, as he called it, is recovery, which is ending all cooperation with China, Russia, and Iran. I have no idea how they intend to enforce that. Ensure the release of political prisoners. There's like over 2,000 of them right now. They've released about 100. So they're quote unquote working on it. But they also want assurances that it's not just going to be like, all right, we're going to release these and put more people in. Like, they want an actual, like, a closing of the political prisoner system. And then they're going to replace a lot of the Russian and Chinese commodities that are being, like food and wheat and all of those sorts of things that are coming from Russia and China, and replace them with American commodities. And then the third is a transition where they actually intend to have Delcy Rodriguez organize an election, and they're going to enforce it.
Has
with.
That been announced? Because I hadn't even really heard that announced or anything.
So it's been spoken of in very vague terms, but Marco Rubio did say they want to transition to a democratic government, so that implies elections. And they actually. Argentina and the Dominican Republic have already issued statements that they are willing to offer troops for a peacekeeping operation to make sure that the elections are carried out legitimately. So when people say, it's kind of funny, you get all these MAGA people, and even like the Fuentes people, saying, oh, this is not regime change. This is a surgical strike because we just took Maduro and we're going to make these people comply by force. If you look at the communications that have come out more recently from the State Department, they do, like, the ultimate goal is regime change. This is a transitional interim government by the authorities, and they're being coerced by force.
Okay, just because I don't find any of this particularly clear, and I do try to follow this, and maybe the people I watch haven't been reporting it. I just find the whole thing very opaque, what the U.S. is actually doing, and it seems to change one day to the next. Mm. But as far as you can tell, there is plans to hold elections at some point in the near future.
Yes, and I think there's actually pressure. Well, and the thing is, nobody knows exactly what the plan is. It's all being kept on, just as nobody knew that they were going to extract Maduro the way they did. The specifics are being very deliberately obscured by the Trump administration. I think, strategic ambiguity or whatever. But
just in practice, that often means we don't have a plan. We just thought this looked cool.
Yeah, for what it's worth, that's actually my view, is they have a vague idea of what they want to happen, but they're playing it by ear. I have no other explanation of their actions.
Just very briefly, and I've said this in the past, I think what they should have done is just offered... Sorry, what's the VP's president's name again?
Delcy Rodriguez.
That Delcy Rodriguez, after Maduro was kidnapped, we won't throw anyone in jail, but we want you to hold internationally monitored elections as soon as it's practical to do so, and accept the results, but we won't conduct like political purges and stuff if your government loses. Was kind of what I had thought. I don't think
and that's...
Sorry.
Yeah, that's what the opposition has been advocating, and actually what the Pope has been advocating. The role of the Vatican, this is super interesting. We'll talk about it later. But there was a leaked conversation that's literally exactly the plan, except they said, just don't kill anyone. Just give the Maduro regime amnesty in an allied country like Russia, the way we did with Bashar al-Assad, and just install your regime, but don't kill anyone. And the U.S. is like, okay, we're going to do what we want anyway. And I think that would have just been a much more popular plan.
Well, just because it's super fragile, like this is not a functional country, and you just don't want anything to collapse. Even if that means everybody gets away with it. Like, to me, Venezuela not collapsing into like a famine, failed state more than it is more important than any kind of...
Well, I mean, it already is, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
No, I mean, like, what little functionality is left, you have to be very difficult about.
Yeah. The Venezuelan reaction has been much more interesting because they're playing both sides, right? Domestically, they're playing, the resistance. And Delcy, when she was sworn in, she said, I am an interim leader until we get our president back. And they've, every single speech and public announcement has been, we are in negotiations to get Maduro back, and we don't intend to accede or whatever. But then you look at how they act. They just opened the American embassy in Caracas again, and director of the CIA, I forget his name, Ratcliffe. Yeah. Oh, it's right there. They had a very cordial meeting, and they're like, oh, welcome. Welcome to Venezuela, and they hosted like a dinner or whatever. So it's like, are you just being diplomatic, or are you trying to save face in front of the regime so that they don't because you have to imagine that even if there is an agreement that the regime doesn't know, that Delcy does know, um, she doesn't want to scare them off because they control a lot of military power. So if they wanted to, a lot of the people who need to go for a transition to happen could easily just like start unleashing a wave of violence like they did in 2024. So it's a very delicate situation. It could easily escalate into a war if it's not handled delicately. So I think she's, whether deliberately because she snaked on all these people and wanted power for herself, or the United States actually does intend for her to rule, it has to be managed in a way that doesn't spark a conflict.
Just aside, I know this is super petty, but look at those running shoes.
Oh, dude, look at the color of her jumpsuit. Like, what the hell is that?
Like, I don't know. It's like you think you could wear like a nice suit or a dress or something if you're meeting the. I don't know. Maybe it's a
no,
power
dude.
move.
Oh no, it's a cultural thing. A lot of these people are just so ratchet. If you look at the way the opposition dresses versus the way the Chavista regime dresses, they're deliberately ratchet. They're kind of like the equivalent of, like a certain demographic in the U.S. wearing their pants below their waist or whatever. Like I said, an act of defiance is like, yeah, I can wear a highlighter yellow suit. What are you gonna do about it? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of violence that could be unleashed. Jorge Rodriguez and Delcy Rodriguez are, I think, two figures we need to talk about. And then Diosdado Cabello, he's actually what many people call the shadow president and has been since Chavez died. He was actually the VP under Chavez. And everybody, before he replaced Maduro last minute when he got cancer, everyone believes that was just a move to make sure that Diosdado didn't have too big of a target on his back internationally. Mm-hmm. And then we can talk about the opposition for a little bit. Sure. I'll be brief about this because I know we've been going for a while, but I think these are important details to understand what happens next. You can go next. So Delcy and Jorge, a lot of people haven't talked about Jorge. They are brother and sister, and they act as a unit. They were raised by a communist guerrilla who, it's a bizarre story where this guy kidnaps, I forget his name, he's like the CEO of a big American company from Illinois. He gets kidnapped for like 48 days. And the Venezuelan government or the military eventually finds him and just kills everybody involved in the kidnapping. So these guys are orphaned at 15 by the government, and they basically vow revenge, and that's their entry into politics. So from the very beginning, their intentions have been to avenge her father and install a communist regime. They began as deputies in the chamber of the National Assembly, so basically like the Congress. And they quickly rise up to cabinet positions because they're Chavez Maduro loyalists. Chavez actually didn't like Delcy very much because she was like, she spoke multiple languages and was sort of more like a technocratic communist, whereas Chavez was more of like a populist.
Right.
But Maduro found her very helpful because he doesn't speak any languages than Spanish, so he would send her as the envoy for international missions. So she rapidly climbs through the ladder. Between her and her brother, they have actually been in every single cabinet position. They're like, oh, this year I'm going to be the Secretary of the Interior. This year I'm going to be the Secretary of Intelligence or whatever. And what's crazy is every time Delcy has entered a position, the previous person has been snaked on. Their stuff has been taken and they're either imprisoned or killed. So we talked earlier about El Pollo, the guy who gave that letter to the U.S. corroborating a lot of the details or whatever. He was actually the former head of intelligence. And then Delcy took power and immediately snaked on him. And it's speculated that Jorge is the one who manages all the finances and Delcy's sort of like the power figure who takes over the offices. Tarek Al-Aissami was also the former vice president and former minister of petroleum. And then she takes those offices and immediately there's like this massive scandal where it's exposed that he stole like several $1 billion in Bitcoin because Venezuela actually has a very extensive Bitcoin mining operation. So just in general,
that's
like this is who she is.
That's also one of the most Latin American things I've ever heard.
Yeah, and it's, her taking over Maduro is like the perfect like cornerstone to this pattern where every single time that she takes a new position, the previous person has their assets frozen and stolen. Maduro, like literally the day after he was on court on Monday, had his assets frozen in Switzerland, over $5 billion. And now Delsey's negotiating taking those for herself.
Well, I mean, the great socialist tyrant just had them there for the Venezuelan people. That's
so
why
true.
They were hidden there.
Yeah, so you can go next. I talked about this a little bit. In 2020, Delsey infamously, so she was sanctioned and she was not allowed to enter the Schengen area. But Pedro Sanchez, who's the current president of Spain, actually, and has been for many years, arranged a meeting between Delsey and his Secretary of Transport, I think it was. And that's when the like 40 suitcases were delivered.
It's just the mental image is just funny.
And this guy actually. So what's bizarre is that Pedro Sanchez knows this is happening, and arranges a meeting because people speculate that the reason this is done is because the party was becoming unpopular and running out of money. So they just needed an infusion of money, and they took it from this guy or from this girl. And when this whole thing is exposed, Pedro's like, what? I didn't know anything. And then he snakes on the transport minister, the guy who actually was physically there. And now he's serving, like, I forget how much time in jail. I think it's actually life. So he's actually the first, like, Spanish cabinet minister since the end of the Franco regime to be serving time in prison. And he was over this. So just a little background on who she is and how she's the main international figurehead for the regime. Diosdado Cabello is, I think, the most important person. And in my view, his fate is going to tell you everything about what the U.S. actually wants and intends to do. Because he is the shadow president. He is the head of the Cartel de los Soles. He was the right-hand man of Chavez from the very beginning. He was there in the 92 coup. He was there in his cabinet in 1999. He was his VP for most of his term. And he, most importantly, is the leader of the colectivos, who are the paramilitary that the Venezuelan government has.
That's
the
literally what they're called?
Yes, the collectives.
The collectivists? Okay, that's funny.
Yes.
Okay.
And what happened is there's systemic insubordination within the Venezuelan military because they don't like the regime. So what he ended up doing is he just made his own parallel military. Which is literally just like he went to like the shanty towns where all the supporters live and gave them baklava's and AK-47s, and he said, "You're the military now." So this guy is in charge of the firepower. There's a military minister. He's kind of like a figurehead. This is the real guy. Like, if there's going to be a civil war, it's because this guy refuses to stand down. So if he remains in place, you can tell the Venezuelan government is actually interested in working with the regime as it exists. If he is extradited or tried or whatever, you know they intend for regime change.
Might he attempt a coup or a civil war or something if...
It's very likely.
They try to throw him under the bus.
Yeah, and this is, I think, what's underappreciated. Like, the United States government has to know, and if they don't know, they fucked up, and we're about to enter another Iraq. Because this guy, and I mean, it's not just the collectivos or whatever. You know how I talked about in our previous stream about the expropriations?
Yeah.
This is the guy who runs a lot of the stuff that's been expropriated. Factories, companies, farms, estates, hotels, malls even. A lot of the stuff that's been expropriated is basically, for all intents and purposes, his property. Mm-hmm. If you combine the proceeds from the drug trade, which he's known to be the leader of, and all the expropriated stuff, he's actually the richest man in South America. Mm-hmm. He has a net worth of like $20 billion.
So was Chavez kind of like the front man and he was kind of the brains of the operation?
Yes. Well, Maduro was the front man. So Chavez was definitely like, there was actually sort of like a power tension between Chavez and him, because Diosdado very clearly intended to become president one day.
Yep.
And that many speculated that's why Chavez demoted him to like Minister of the Interior or whatever. So if you go next, these are the colectivos. That's what they look like.
It looks like Metro meets Latin America.
Dude, there's a shame. There's a rendering error, but basically there's Operation Tuntun, which translates to Operation Knock Knock. After the 2024 elections, when there were protests, when it was exposed that the numbers have been told, I don't know if you remember, like the total of the numbers added to like 132%.
Yeah, I remember that. Didn't they all come in like the last half hour or something? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, anyway, I won't get into that. But after that, there were massive protests. And this guy just sent out the colectivos. They kidnapped like 2,000 people in one day. And he has basically been running a torture ring where, and there's been like leaks of this because people have escaped, or there's like videos that show up on the internet of like just people being made to like defecate on their prison cells and then like eat from that spot. Like they would just toss the food in there and they would be made to eat there. There's an infamous case of like and you can, this is all on Twitter, by the way. You can look up these videos. I'm obviously not going to include them here. Of like a basketball court that's like lined with the political prisoners and people like the military or the colectivos who play basketball using those people as the floor mat. So just like all sorts of like insane third world torture things that it's like, if it wasn't for the videos, you would think that I'm making this up. So, and the other thing they'll do is they'll kidnap American citizens for leverage with the U.S. And that's part of what they did with in 2022 when they released the narco sobrinos, like the nephews of Maduro who had been taken with like 800 kilograms of cocaine. They released them, and in return they got like 5 or 6, I forget the number.
Where were these guys arrested?
American citizens
Arrested?
They were intercepted in Haiti, and they were extradited to the U.S.
Okay, but the CIA planted that 100 kilograms. Like that.
Also true.
Yeah.
So anyway, this picture you might remember from my previous stream. This is called El Helicoide.
Sorry,
or El Helicoide, sorry.
My, keyboard.
Oh, good cat. This was an abandoned, half-constructed shopping mall. It was never finished in the 70s. They just left it there.
So shitty.
Oh, well, and it's not finished, right? Like, this is the concrete foundation. They're supposed to put stuff on it. But anyway, it was just sitting there for, like, 30 years. Some people, like, took the space and made offices with it or whatever. Diosdado actually turned it into a prison. So this is now, like, the highest security prison in Venezuela, and it's used exclusively for political prisoners. A lot of the videos that I'm talking about come from here. So that gives you an idea of the type of guy he is. We're like, oh, we have this empty mall. It's turning into a prison.
So this is the Venezuelan Bastille?
Basically. Yeah. So anyway, all this to say, this guy, he's the real prize. If there's going to be a regime change, you're going to, number one, try to get rid of him. Because, and he's the reason a lot of companies are unwilling to invest. Because every time there have been attempts at international investment, the guy would just expropriate it and take it for himself and then defend it with the colectivos. So unless he's removed, there's not going to be any meaningful investment from the United States. Which takes us to Maria Corina Machado. I'm sure everyone has seen this character over the past 48 hours. I've referred to her as Temu Nikki Haley, perhaps a little uncharitably, because she's 100% like the girl boss, neocon, classical liberal politician. But I think that does her a disservice because she really has been, she has garnered a lot of support even from people on the Venezuelan left in the opposition because she's gone through a lot, dude. And it's important to sort of distinguish between like her cringe political takes and how she's just like prostrating herself before Trump versus all the stuff that she has gone through and why she has become because she is cringe. So like, why would she become the leader of the Venezuelan opposition, especially when the country isn't even in particularly right wing? Well, it's because she's basically been through it all. So she was born to a family of traditionalist Catholics, and she was an engineer by trade. She worked in the nonprofit world for a little bit before she got really into politics in 2002 when there was that
the coup?
Referendum revocatorio. What would you call that? It's like there was an election whether or not to recall Chavez after the coup. She alleges that there were election irregularities and that Chavez actually lost that vote.
No.
So she was so pissed about this whole thing that she tried to organize a movement to do a second recall, and they basically booted her out of her. Basically, nobody took her seriously. So she did what any desperate right-wing Latin American would do and sought the help of the United States. She was actually somewhat close with, there's a picture of her in a meeting with George Bush. And it's basically speculated that she was receiving support from the United States from the very beginning. She eventually becomes an elected deputy, like congresswoman, in 2011, and challenges Chavez to a debate. At which point, there's a very infamous line where Chavez laughs at her, because this is in the middle of the State of the Union address, which, to be fair, is also very cringe, right? Like, this guy has been going for like 8 hours, as he normally does. And then she stands up in the middle of the speech. She says, like, dude, you've been going for 8 hours. Nobody knows what the fuck you're talking about. Nobody likes you. Why don't you we have an election in 1 year. I'm running. Several other people here are running. Why don't we arrange a real debate instead of just you monologuing? And this actually started like this massive chimp out. People were like screaming. And Chavez, like, there's a whole like gravel thing. It's like, order, whatever. And she's like, you know what? You're not even worth my time. And he says, Gavilán no caza mosca, which translates to like, the eagle doesn't hunt fruit flies.
In other words, the lion does not concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
Yes. Yes. So that's the moment that makes her famous.
Right.
Because everyone was sick of these addresses that last like several hours. And eventually she's actually disqualified from running. They make up some like bullshit charges against her. There's another infamous moment from this election cycle where she, like after the election, she shows because she's an election integrity activist. That's her whole like bread and butter. She shows all the ballot boxes that were burned and like shows the videos and the evidence or whatever. She has a burned ballot box or whatever. And one of the Chavista congresswomen says, "You're just making all this up," and punches her in the face, fractures her nose, and starts a brawl inside the Congress where like 11 people are injured and taken to the hospital. This is like massive shit show. So she's been through it all. She's been like beat in the face in the Congress. She's been barred from running. She's eventually barred from exiting the country. And then she's exiled and barred from entering the country. So she's like, there's a complete shit show. Can you go to the next slide? She becomes, sort of by her defiance and her brand of boss girlism, she becomes the front runner in the 2024 primary. And she actually consolidates the entire opposition because her whole argument was the previous opposition leaders have been controlled opposition. It's very obvious that the elections are being stolen and they're doing nothing to contest it. So I'm just going to make my own right-wing party and fuck all of you. And that sentiment was so popular that she actually wins by a landslide because all these people are just sick and tired of the ineffectual opposition. In response to that, they dig up this picture of her with George Bush from 2005, and they say, "You are a CIA agent, so we're stopping you from running." So they actually bar her from the election. And she starts nominating surrogates, right? So it's like, well, if I can't run, this lady's going to run. She's also barred. They bar like 10 people in this way. Until eventually she digs up this guy, Edmundo Gonzalez, who's like 80-some years old. He was like a diplomat from the 90s. Who had been retired for 25 years, which is why they couldn't dig up any dirt on him. And eventually he runs as a surrogate for Maria Corina. And this is the part that a lot of people don't know, and this is the part that actually won her the Nobel Peace Prize. Unbeknownst to all, while all of this was happening, she actually was working in a clandestine operation with the Venezuelan military to oversee the elections. So the regime, right, the Maduro government stations military personnel at the ballot boxes to make sure that people are voting the right way, right? They're like, "Oh, who are you voting for?" or whatever, with like a big AK-47 as a sort of intimidation tactic. What the government didn't know is that there was so much insubordination within the military that Maria Corina actually plants a bunch of her people to oversee the elections, and they secure the ballots. And this is how they're able to prove the fraud. In addition to sort of like the totals that don't add up.
And the 60% of ballots dropped in the last half hour.
Yeah, I mean, like the fraud was transparent, right? But she needed a proof, right? Because they could easily say, "Oh, you're just making this up," just as they made it up. Mm-hmm. So with this operation, she's able to secure the majority of the ballots and show that Edmundo Gonzalez actually won by like 62%. For this, she is exiled and has been in hiding for the past 2 years.
Other than government employees and just the underclass who they throw money at, does anyone actually support the Maduro regime?
You'd be surprised, actually. Like, roughly 30% of the population are going to be Chavistas no matter what.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's kind of like the base of, like, you know, like how 20-some% of the country are just like rabid Democrats and are always going to vote blue no matter who. Or like how 30% of the country are evangelical Christians who are going to vote red even if, like, they say we hate you or whatever. In a similar way, especially because a lot of these people voted for Chavez because that was like the first time they ever voted in an election, and he gave them free stuff.
The impression I get about Venezuela politically is it's kind of a Christian democratic country. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and actually, before Chavez took office, the two big parties were a Christian Democratic Party and a like center-left, American-aligned, a Social Democrat Party.
Right. I just figure like the Christian left are like they want communitarian, Christian-inspired, like centrist to center left. Is just
that's exactly right.
I get.
Yeah, and that's part of why they hold Maria Corina with such skepticism and contempt, because she's the first like actual like libertarian right-wing party to run in Venezuela for like literally ever. There has never been a libertarian party before her. So she's been in hiding for over 18 months. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and you notice in the picture that is not her, that is her daughter.
I was gonna say, wow, those 18 months were hard, but okay.
No, that's her daughter. Because she's been in hiding, she cannot publicly show herself because they're like trying to hunt her down and kill her. So she can't even receive her own Nobel Peace Prize, and she actually doesn't make a public appearance until a couple weeks ago when Maduro is captured. And she basically spent the next 2 years sort of like providing material support for the opposition. And people accuse her like, why don't you go back or whatever? The answer is because they're going to capture her and beat her and rape her and kill her.
I'm going to be honest. I just wanted to thank you just because I didn't really know much about her, but it makes her actually sound like she deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. Like she actually did. I mean, well, you could argue whether she deserved it or not, but she actually did something. She's not just some random person. The Americans.
Oh, no, right.
Like that actually required courage and competence to pull that thing off with the ballot boxes.
Oh, no, for sure, dude. And that's sort of like the sad thing. A lot of people haven't heard of any of these characters until now. So they see Delcy Rodriguez. Oh, she's the reformist faction of the party. They have no idea what that means.
Because she's kind of become the black science man of Latin America. This black science guy,
right? Or like Maria Corina Machado, right? Like I call her Monique Haley, right? So people just think, oh, she's a neocon, whatever. She's probably a Zionist, whatever. She's like, I've heard even some people say that. She's like, oh, she's actually secretly Jewish, which, funnily enough, do an early life check on Maduro to get an interesting bit on that. But people just say things because they don't know who these people are or what they've been through. And they just see, like, the really cringe, like, oh, here's my Nobel Peace Prize, Trump. And they just see, wow, cringe. This is just a bootlicker. And they don't know sort of like the 20 years of like literally getting punched in the face in the Congress and having to go into exile for your country.
To be fair, she's probably really desperate. And I can't,
obviously.
I can't. I get it's cringe and I get it's subservient, but she really has no leverage. And all she can really do is just appeal to Trump's ego. So is it degrading? Yes. But do I sympathize? Yes.
Yeah, right. Like she's desperate for a reason, right? Because she has tried every avenue, and people will say like, "Oh, look at how cringe she is, defacing herself towards Trump." The entire Venezuelan opposition has been bootlicking Trump now for over a year because he's the first person to signal that he actually intends to do something. So, like, the cult of Trump is real in Venezuela. So where do things stand now? Delcy has been cooperating with the demands of the American government right now. So there are a couple of people that the U.S. wanted. Alex Saab, who was wanted for like money laundering or whatever, has been removed from his ministry. His ministry was actually removed entirely, dismantled, which is super interesting because that's going way further than anybody expected. Over 300 political prisoners allegedly have been released so far. And that said, the oil tankers are still being not just monitored but seized. The United States actually just seized 2 of them this week that were in, in violation of the terms of the treaty. Because these were like the Russian tankers that were going off to Europe or whatever. So they're clearly like trying to, again, have their cake and eat it too. They are abiding by all the symbolic gestures, probably because they're desperate and they don't want to be next in the extradition game. But they're still very clearly, they're not severing their ties with China or Russia as expected or as indicated. So nobody knows where things stand domestically in Venezuela. Trump and a Senate delegation met with Maria Corina Machado on Thursday, January 15th. And it's so funny. You see this clip that I have here. So Trump meets with her, and then the next day there's an interview asks him, why are you aligning with Delcy and not with Machado? And Trump says, I didn't know actually who she was until I met her yesterday. Which is the most insane, because there's a whole thing of, we're working with a transition. We want to make sure it's orderly, whatever. But then he comes out with a statement like that, and it's Trump, right? Like if it was Marco Rubio or if it was JD Vance, they would have come up with some politically correct answer to like deflect accountability and like not explain what's actually going on. Trump, being Trump, just says frankly, I didn't know who she was. Which indicates to me that they really haven't done their homework, and that's why I'm a little scared about what's coming next. That said, this is a correct argument that I think he's making here. He says, if you remember a place called Iraq, which is so funny, it's such a Trump way of saying it, where everybody was fired, every single person, the police, the generals, everybody was fired, they ended up being ISIS. His point is that the lesson to learn from Iraq isn't even necessarily that regime change is incorrect, but that if you do it all at once, without the consent or compliance of the baseline population, they're not going to comply, and they're going to do their own thing. So whatever approach the U.S. ends up taking needs to be one of cooperation and like mediated
they can't
gradual
just go
transition.
in and purge every single Chavista from the government because
that wouldn't. Right, because then that would engender an armed resistance. And it's one thing to extract one guy in the middle of the night. It's another to take out like 700 dudes, all of whom have connections with,
I don't think anyone liked Maduro, even within the regime. I think kind of summarized...
And it's worth noting... Yeah, go ahead.
Him is when he like shoved the empalada or whatever it was into his gullet while he was giving the wasn't it literally a speech about like how the country,
shortages,
there's shortages of food. He's just stuffing his face when he thought the camera was off.
No, dude, it's crazy. And completely lost my train of thought, but I was going to talk about the transition of power, and basically whether or not Trump intends to do a regime change, this is how it's going to play out, right? Like he's not going to go in and just kill everyone. He's going to gradually attempt to purge whatever he can and then enforce a transition. And I think it's smart to take it this route. But yeah, I think a lot of people who are saying, oh, this is not regime change, are just coping because they don't understand that this is obviously the ultimate strategic objective of the United States in the region.
It's just done in a really weird way.
Right. Yeah. Unanswered questions. Did Delcy, as I said, have an agreement from the beginning? Like, was she a big snake and was this being planned for half a year? We don't know. We probably never know.
The Venezuelan military performed so poorly, people aren't sure if it was incompetence or they were paid off, is what I've seen a lot. And honestly, it's kind of hard to tell.
Oh, and actually, okay, thank you for bringing up the military, because that's what I was going to say. So you mentioned, does anybody even like Maduro? You'll notice that when they talk about the death totals of the operation, 32 people died. Every single one of them was Cuban. Why? because especially after that whole thing with the ballots and the military like mass insubordination, the regime said or learned the lesson: we cannot even trust our military because they obviously want us gone. So then they, like every military unit has a Cuban attaché now. The entire security detail is now Cubans, subservient obviously to the Cuba regime, because every single Venezuelan that's been in the security services has snaked on them. As I mentioned earlier, Salazar and El Pollo and all these people, every single one of them has eventually like snaked and spoken to the DA over the American government.
Is that just because like these people are so unpleasant and disgusting and unlikable?
Yeah, everyone just hates them. So now they're just relying on Cubans and Russians because no one else, like no one domestically wants them there.
Right.
So we'll try and seek regime change. I think we'll know again whether they take Diosdado and other people who are actually the ones in control of the crime and the guns and the drugs. Are other countries next? There's a headline here. Trump turns Colombia's president. He's got to watch his ass. I mentioned that Colombia and Brazil have elections this year. Does the American government intend to use this as a leverage tactic to get those governments either gone or the elections to go a certain way? Also, which by the way might backfire, just as it backfired in Canada last year. There's Cuba, there's Nicaragua. So obviously, like this is the beginning. It not just in terms of Venezuela, but like there might be several other countries on the list. And if Trump intends to do this, he would likely want to act definitely before the end of his term, if not before the midterms. So expect this year to have a lot of action in Latin America.
Right.
Or maybe not. I don't know. How will China and Russia react? One of the incredible stories that came out this week, China, all of a sudden, is asking Venezuela to pay back its $20 billion in debt.
They can't do that.
Of course they can't. Which, again, to me is another indication that there's going to have to be regime change and, or the U.S. intents regime change and, like, wiping the slate clean and be like, oh, that was the different government. We didn't owe you that. They owed you that. And maybe they even pay it with, like, frozen assets that they take from these people as they extradite them one by one. Who knows? And then what role is the Vatican playing? As I mentioned, there were a couple of leaked correspondences, and the Pope is human right now, actually. I think this is very reckless of whoever it was, whether it's Vance or somebody else. But there was a meeting between Parolin, who's the Secretary of State of the Vatican, and Rubio and Vance. And the contents of the meeting were allegedly secret, but it was leaked by the Washington Post.
I really hate how much, I don't know, I just find it grossly irresponsible how much this administration leaks shit.
Oh, yeah. Well, whether it was the administration or some like journalists or whatever.
Okay, their OPSEC is bad. Either way, their OPSEC.
100% right. Yeah, no, it's driving a rift between the Pope and the American government. It's funny because people are complaining about Pope Leo or whatever, saying extra Y about immigration or Gaza or whatever. And it's like, well, the U.S. isn't really playing nice with them. So it's almost like you're burning your own political goodwill. So yeah, anyway, Parolin was the nuncio to Venezuela, and he hates Chavez, or he hated Chavez back in the day. So it's likely that, and actually, if you go to the next slide, Maria Corina actually met with Pope Leo. That was her first public appearance, even before meeting Trump. So some people speculate that the Vatican actually played a bigger role in the negotiations than people expected. Which leads me to watch out for PSYOPs, because there's going to be a lot of shit right now. People are, I'm sure, accusing me right now of being a CIA PSYOP or whatever. The reality is, as with any story of geopolitical import, both sides are doing all sorts of shady things. Tucker Carlson, honestly, has been so... It's sad watching him disgrace himself this way, because he's the most powerful conservative commentator in the United States, right?
Yep, I'd agree.
By far. And been trying to build up goodwill with people by having like Nick Fuentes and Ted Cruz and trying to like reach across the aisle, all factions of the American right or whatever. But a lot of the guests that he brings on and a lot of the talking points he has, if you look into them, dude, it's like, for instance, he brought this guy, Robert Amsterdam. You'll remember Tucker was talking about how, Maduro, at least he was conservative because he didn't like gay marriage or whatever, which, by the way, isn't even true. And actually, Delcy Rodriguez introduced the first hate speech legislation in Latin America in 2017. back when she was still in the National Assembly. And Maduro himself like pushed for inclusive language and all this shit. So it's not even correct. The whole like, oh, he's conservative, just because, you know, like abortion and gay marriage are just a different topic entirely. I think it's incorrect to just sort of like transpose or project an American left-right divide into Latin America, because the internal politics are just different.
No, even like the far left will often not be pro-abortion. At least that's what I find in Latin America.
Right, it doesn't map out like one-to-one the way it does in the U.S.
Like,
but anyway,
isn't Nicaragua very restrictive on that, despite being?
Yeah. But anyway, this Robert Amsterdam guy, he's a FARA registered foreign agent who was, and this is known, you can look this up. He was paid $4 million by the Maduro regime in 2020 to advocate for the lifting of sanctions. He is a sort of an international lawyer who specializes in sort of like
that's a bad
guerrillas and communist regimes.
That's another bad sign.
Right, and it's like, is this really an organic talking point that you're getting from Tucker, or is somebody maliciously inserting himself into the broader right-wing sphere to push a particular talking point? Another one, so that's sort of on the American right. There's a lot of pro-Maduro people. Also on the American left, the New York Times' dedicated columnist, he wrote this whole op-ed about how like, oh, Maria Corina doesn't have respect in Venezuela or whatever. Like, Trump is actually right about that. He was actually the economic advisor from Chavez from 2001 to 2004. This guy has had his claws in the Venezuelan government for many, many years, and he's now the writer at the New York Times. Why did they choose him? Obviously, there's a moneyed interest in there as well. And he has been writing all sorts of books trying to explain away the economic collapse of Venezuela by blaming it on mismanagement of the oil industry and
by the Americans, not the Venezuelans.
Right, like being like, oh, it's all the sanctions and the international pressure or whatever, when that's not even true. Like, the actual issues with the Venezuelan economy are partly his fault, actually, for the currency exchange restrictions and price controls, all the stuff we talked about on a previous podcast. So there's just a lot of dishonesty and a lot of moneyed interests being desperately trying to protect their own. Because again, Diosdado Cabello is the richest man in South America. Like, these people have a lot of money to push around and influence politics in ways that people aren't necessarily aware. People, it's so funny, will know, you know, with like a certain geopolitical conflicts in the Middle East, they're aware that what they're being told in the surface isn't the reality underneath. But then they'll go into a subject where they don't know all the facts and assume that, you know, like the people on the right or on the left are just like feeding them organic talking points, as opposed to like, actually every single country does this, and they pay influencers on both the left and the right to move things in their direction.
They might just think Venezuela is not competent enough to do this, which
it doesn't take a lot of competence to, you know, wave around a bunch of drug and oil money, though.
No, but I think Tucker's part of a broader issue. I think a lot of people who are critical of the U.S., and I am too, will just jump on the bandwagon of anyone who's anti-American or takes a shot. So I feel like with the Maduro government, it's just, oh, well, he's shitting on America for stupid stuff they're doing, so he's got to be our bro. Tucker, I find, is very much in this category, unfortunately, and he will kind of just believe anybody.
Well, and it's like, he interviewed Vladimir Putin. Like,
yep.
There's very obviously a sort of like, oh, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And if the American government is paused or whatever, therefore, whoever opposes the American government must necessarily be my ally. And of course, all these people have no interest in supporting America. They're in many, or Europe for that matter. Like, I don't need to tell you like about the time when the Belarusian regime was found trafficking hundreds of thousands of Pakistanis into Poland. So anyway, it's on both sides. You got to watch out. And I don't know, like, I would say keep an eye, but all of this happens in Spanish. Like, I think people should be a little bit more agnostic of what happens, because even people who are in the know don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know, it's coming one day at a time. And then Venezuelan reaction. This is in Spanish, of course, so I'm sure people won't even necessarily care. But if you want to see how people are reacting, this is a very famous Venezuelan comedian. He calls himself George Harris. Yeah, that's sort of like his stage name. So he is his whole brand is he's like a Venezuelan in exile, and he does shows in like New York and Miami or whatever, like where most Venezuelans live these days. And you should see the energy. It's just like electric. People are just like celebrating in ways that I think would shock even because you talked earlier on your server about like, oh, look at the polling within Latin America. Yeah, so many people support this, and it's like I don't think people realize how happy and how like this is if this is managed well by the U.S., which is a big if. This could generationally transform the relationship between Latin America and the U.S. Because for the past like 80 years, the entire narrative culturally has been the U.S. Wants to control us and our resources, and no, we are independent nations. If the U.S. is able to remove regimes like the one in Venezuela or Cuba, get those refugees back, and actually materially improve things, I think that will go a long way in changing people's opinions in this hemisphere about the U.S. Because like the reality speaks louder than words, and yeah, just like memes like this, like I think it's really funny. Like
throw this up. So this was, I don't have the source here, but this is like what the poll numbers are of in Latin America of support for the removal of Maduro. Sorry, you can't see it because it's on the.
I'm seeing it on the stream. Yeah,
the stream. It's like. It's overwhelming, and I've seen multiple polls for this, but you'll have like 90% in Costa Rica, like 74% in Peru, and it tracks pretty well, at least from my understanding, with the number of refugees, but people hate him. Like some of these are like the net approval is like over 50% in a lot of countries. So did literally just everybody hate him in Latin America?
Yeah, I mean it's. I think it's hard to overstate, hard to overstate how hated he is.
Chavez, I feel, was like at least like a little bit likable. Like he was
right.
He was an asshole, but like he was a little bit likable.
Right. That's generally the opinion is. Chavez won for a reason. He was extremely charismatic. He was sort of like a one-off figure, kind of like Trump, right? Like somebody like Marco Rubio did or said the things that Trump did, he would not have a political career. But because it's Trump and he's funny and this is like larger-than-life personality, people love him, and he's able to get away with a lot. Chavez is a lot the same way, but Maduro and all these other people. Well, number one, like their crimes have just been exposed for the past 10 years. Like it's easy to ignore. The incompetence or the malevolence of a regime like Chavez's when their people are all in their own country still. But when your country has 1 million Venezuelans and they're all telling you, yeah, no, these people are the devil. And look at what they're doing. And they're showing you videos on WhatsApp. And it's like, oh, yeah, my brother got detained and he got beat in the head by a colectivo. Or, oh, yeah, I lost someone in a kidnapping.
Get over Collectivo. It sounds like something from like a parody movie.
Yeah, and it's just a reality. Like everybody in Latin America knows someone now who has been a victim of this regime. So if they're able to successfully remove it and transition to literally anything else, whether it's this Delcy regime, if they really do just like snake on all the corrupt people and get them out, or if they do intend to have a transition to democracy, I think the people in America will celebrate. And that's a big if, right? And I've mentioned this a million times, but this is Trump administration we're talking about. The easy part was telling the military guy, hey, do what you're best at. The difficult part is the diplomacy with an administration that has proven that, look at how they're burning their goodwill with what's left of Europe and NATO with this whole Greenland thing, right? Like, and for all the good he has done, he has alienated vast swaths of the international, even American allies. So,
well, he destroyed the relationship with India for no reason.
Try drinking some water. Yeah, or even with Japan, dude. Like, I mean, the Japanese are like staunch pro-Americans or whatever, but even the previous administration there was actively trying to distance himself from America. And it's part of the reason why in recent elections they've been looking to rearm, which was unthinkable in Japan just like 20 years ago, because people see America increasingly as unreliable. So I think the incentives are there for America to pursue hemispheric alignment in the Americas because everyone else is trying to go away from America. And but that also means that they're likely to fumble this. So am I optimistic? Honestly, it's hard to tell.
Are you just happy Maduro's gone? And if nothing else, that's something?
Oh, 100%, dude. Like, my only disappointment is that they didn't, like, publicly humiliate and decapitate him in the streets of Caracas. Like, dude, him and all these other fuckers, like, dude, Diosdado Cabello is like, if anybody needs to die, it's him. And I'm talking, like, Saddam style, just, like, drag him across the streets. And people will celebrate. And then, of course, what happens next is this horrible civil war. I'm not optimistic about a peaceful transition. And I guess I'll close with this. Even if Trump does it well, and there is a peaceful transition, and the Argentinian, Costa Rican, whatever occupation force like successfully manages to make that happen, 9 million people have still left the country, and those are the people you want in the country. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of, like, it's a talking point that people use for a reason, right? Rhetorically, like, if we stabilize the country, people will want to come back. I want to press a big X to doubt on that, because people have made lives elsewhere. Even if people wanted to come back, like, if you all of a sudden you live in Germany, or you live in the United States, or you live in Argentina, and you're told, hey, go back to this country where there's rolling blackouts. And there hasn't been consistent supply of like milk or rice or meat in the grocery stores for 15 years. How many people are actually going to take that? It's easy to say, yeah, we're free, baby. It's another thing to actually build back the country when all the capital and all the human capital especially has left. I think it's hard to describe what's happened in Venezuela over the past 15 years as anything other than civilizational collapse. And just because all of a sudden you have...
Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, like, it'll take a lot to rebuild confidence in the rule of law and arbitration of international contracts for foreign investment to even kick in. And Trump being like, hey, we got rid of Maduro, you can go invest. People are correctly saying, hell no, I'm not. And I think the diaspora is rightly thinking the same thing. It'll take decades to rebuild what Venezuela once was. And unless you have assurances for people, I can see maybe like 2-3 million people going back if things are handled optimally, which I don't think they will be. But realistically, I think Venezuela is still just over in a way that isn't recoverable for like a generation or two. It's a fundamentally different country. Sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I was just going to say, like, I remember reading that there are just massive warehouses, like, full of food that rots because the government's too incompetent to distribute it. And stuff like that. Like, it sounds just like one of the most inept governments in the world.
Yeah. And it's sad because it didn't used to be that way, but I guess what I'm saying is, even if a peaceful transition to a different type of government is successfully managed, it'll take years before it is anything other than what it is right now. Because ultimately, a country is sort of its people, its businesses, its logistics, its infrastructure, its investment. And none of those things are going to magically reappear just because the government changes.
Right.
And I think ultimately that's sort of like, from the Venezuelan perspective, the like realist clear pill takeaway is nothing ever happens. and that's, I say that cynically, right? Like, obviously something big did happen, and something big, regardless of how the year goes, will happen. But I'm not optimistic about the future of the country, and I think people should be realistic about repatriation and what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Well, thank you. I'll let you go because I know you had to get back to something. But thank you very much for coming on, man. I appreciate that for all the effort you put in. Presentation went great. You were very organized. I learned a lot from this, to be honest. Just because you have kind of the exact opposite opinion of what most people in these circles do. The only other people I've seen that have kind of that perspective are like Sargon and his guys. But
Notably not American either.
no, but thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, of course, it's been wonderful, and I'm glad I was able to share a different perspective.
Okay. God bless, man.
Thank you. You too.
Well, I hope people enjoyed that interview. I certainly did. Good guy. I don't think he had anything he wanted to shill, but just wanted to say God bless everybody. I'm going to try to have the RGs tomorrow night. I'll set up a scheduled stream soon. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you again real